Did we do it right?
I think
Perfect.
we're good, yeah.
Awesome. First of all, thank you guys very much for the opportunity to be up here. I think to kind of kickstart the conversation, besides people, I think everybody understands the value of data to the organization as a whole. But if you just go back even 3 to 5 years ago, the idea of who owns the data, I would ask these questions to executive officers through my daily life, and it was almost like a ping pong effect. There was the lines of business saying it was IT saying it was the lines of business, and just back and forth. So this idea of a chief data officer, where does it reside? Is it something that the business owns? Does it report up through IT? Is there a position? Just give me some insight with what's going on at J&J.
Sure. So clearly the data is owned by the business and belongs to the business, and IT is a custodian of the business. So there's a lot of discussion and different interpretation of what is a data officer or what's a data science officer. So I assume responsibility to be the global head as a data science for J&J. And basically what I'm trying to do is take data sciences or a global vision of J&J to become a science and technology company and bring the next level of strategy of how is that going to happen with data sciences. And I'm really glad to have the speaker just before this session, because one of the things I'm having many discussions with the business is the fact that big data and data sciences and the world of AI is actually shaping the global markets in terms of job markets. It's actually changing customer expectations, and that's what we heard before. And it's not looking at the competition or what another pharma company is doing. The world is changing. It's coming from the industry. It's coming from technology. And it's also going to affect our profitability. So we are setting strategy at the functional and business level. And J&J has multiple businesses, and we make everything from shampoo to medicine for cancer. So you cannot have one strategy on how you're going to use data sciences, because there's a different strategy of how do you implement data sciences into robotics, and how do you implement it into improving your discovery for research, or how you bring medicine to market to improve outcomes, and also how do you become a better consumer company. So working at the next level and making clear that data is a business asset. Yep. So it's not an IT asset, it's a business asset. So we're setting a framework for governance, clarity on who owns the data, who makes decisions, who gets access. And the majors about security, compliance, privacy, business have to set those rules and expectations because we're a highly regulated company. So, and then we don't throw technology. And then one of the speakers said we usually start with just throwing technology at a problem. So the idea is not to throw technology, but to really establish governance and ownership. And then IT comes in as a custodian of the data to provide the data and do the curation according to the business requirements and make it available and bring the tools to be analyzed.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's actually just continue going this way. So Pete, let's talk with you next. Aflac, I think everybody knows who Aflac is. Now that we're in this collection of big data, how are you and Aflac trying to use the collection of the data to drive innovation and transform Aflac as a company?
I mean, there's a few different ways. The classic way, and for our actuaries, the more data you have, the more accurately you can price risk. And that's basically what insurance companies do, right? They come up with a fee for a certain policy, and it's based on all kinds of historic data. So the more rapidly you can access large sets of data, and it could be, healthcare data, it could be social media data, which is, maybe with the latest issues with Facebook, maybe not so big anymore, but that's just the key for insurance companies. And also, if you look at investment banks and other things too, it's basically you're pricing risk. You're trying to come up with an efficient price on something, either that you're going to give or you're going to take. So that's traditional. But then if you go beyond that, and where we're starting to dabble into, and other insurance companies are as well, and you look at machine learning and artificial intelligence. All of those things need gigantic data sets, right? They really function off of, not only large data sets, but, to my partner here, clean data sets, right? Because it's only as good as the information you have. So as you start, either doing machine learning where you're taking some of your robotics that, a lot of you guys I'm sure have put in, but then having to go beyond just doing simple human repetition, but actually learning from the mistakes that are made, that's just all about data sets, and you want them to access them quickly. So it changes the thought process, and it's enabling, the new growth of artificial intelligence and machine learning that just, the techniques have been out there for 30, 40, 50 years, but now we have the tools to actually implement them in a real world fashion, and that's really where we're going right now.
Great, thanks. Tsvi, how you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Awesome. So let's talk about data science. So how are you and Morgan Stanley looking at utilizing data science and analysts to utilize the data in a different way?
So for us, we look at the data science as basically the base on which also the other things that Pete was talking about in Georgia. So machine learning, AI, all of those things are sitting on top of data science. The idea for us is basically to expose and really research the data that we own, both internally and externally, for the benefit of the company. Now, okay, that's 200,000 feet, not even 100,000. Yep. So let's land a little bit. Where do we actually use it? So we use it both defensively and offensively. Defensively, when it comes to, for example, cybersecurity and stuff as such, when it's a DDoS attack, we know how to deal with it. When there are malwares and trojans, etc., normally we know how to do it. Even when you have a smart malware that gets in and is more dormant, we capture it with honeypots and other mechanisms. But as we progress, so does the adversaries. And now we're dealing with very smart technologies that is now, it's kind of a state-level technologies that now it's in the hands of private people and organized crimes. And as such, we are dealing with nuances, things that are very hard to find. We use data science for anomaly detection. We use it for the needle in the haystack type of situation. We look for kind of type of patterns as they're being built over time, and it's all based on statistics and Bayesian models and clustering and the rest of data science. So that's an example on the defensive side. On the offensive side, we are using data science for different things, such as anything from enabling our, forgive me the previous speaker, chatbots and others, but also for situations such as, in our case, in our wealth management side, is what we call next best action. How do you determine for a specific individual what is the next best action? So we do it overall, and then you need to personalize it. The role of robo-advisors, which is basically automatic way for us to engage with our clients, is yet another example of usage of data science, when we actually identify the needs of the individual, but then go and search the 7 million accounts that we have, yep, trying to find similar patterns, suggest similarities, create situations, and we do statistical analysis on the trends in the industry. So the idea of using data science is basically as a tool that enables the business to become more productive, but also on a defensive side. And we use data scientists. By the way, the word data scientist has been abused in no end. Mm-hmm. Every data analyst or a DBA, yes, in the past is now a data scientist. Yes. So the answer is no, they're not. What we are trying to do is we use real data scientists from different colleges and universities. We teach people the science of data, which has a lot to do with mathematics, with statistics, with other things that are not necessarily just computing. Yep. We have 22,000 people in IT. So we have enough engineers. We have a handful of data scientists. They are very hard to find, the real ones, but when we find them, we actually try to not just use them and learn from them, but let them teach the rest of us so we can actually advance in this.
Perfect, good points. Let's actually come back this way, so let's stick with you. One more question. Change. Change is never easy. And when you talk about becoming a data-driven enterprise, how do you look at change? How do you manage the change? Because when you just think about technology, people, process, culture, it's an enormous challenge. So how are you guys managing the change?
So you're absolutely right. Change is difficult, especially when it comes to people. Yeah. Technology, we know how to evolve, we know how to change, we do it every now and then, and especially every few years when there is a new buzzword, we try to make sure that our management understands that we are buzzword compliant, everything is fine, nothing to worry about. But seriously, when it comes down to real change, it is difficult because it's cultural. It is cultural because we are traditionally silo-based, and also the data resides within those different silos. I agree with Georgia that data really belongs to the corporations, and we have stewards that can actually manage it, etc., but the data does not belong to a specific group. This was a very long process to convince people that it's not your data, it's our data. And as such, we try to build not just the technologies that enables us to cross-reference between different datas and SQL, non-SQL, structured, unstructured, and semi-structured, but also to make sure that people understand that the data can play a major role in the success of the company as such. So a lot of seminars, a lot of internal hackathons among different groups. We adopted DevOps in some of the areas that we can, and Agile. And later on we can discuss not here, but what it is and what it's not, and all the buzzwords around it. But it actually really helps to put this change into motion. The biggest problem, of course, are two. One, which, as I said, first is the people's attitude, etc. The second one is the legacy. So no matter how much, how progressive in our thinking we are, our data still, by and large, resides in legacy containers. They could be anything from old databases like from Sybase, which refuses to die, to Teradata, to DB2, name it, all the way to unstructured data or semi-structured data that is documented, etc. So there's a huge amount of legacy, and there are tools today that enable you to read and do ETL and more smarter things to do it, but still it's very hard to make those changes because the legacy is the one that is holding us. Yep. So one of the things that we are looking at are two things. First of all, in new developments, we are trying to stick to open source and more open environments for data as well. But for the legacy, we are trying to use a set of APIs and other mechanisms to access the data, but it's still a challenge.
Thank you. Let's go back to Pete. So now that we're in this whole digital transformation, becoming a data-driven enterprise, I kind of call it the art of the possible. So the idea that now you have it, what can you do differently with it? Were there any kind of enlightening experiences, insights that you and your organization have been able to gain utilizing this? Yeah,
there's been a few. I mean, Tsvi mentioned it. It's a lot about pattern recognition, and there's a few ways that you use that, right? So some, and we had the CISOs up here before, and they talked about, the biggest risk is bad actors coming in from email, and I agree with that. But there's also bad actors in your company. So how do you find those as well? And they're all kind of together. So as Tsvi mentioned, looking at patterns of access to systems, data retrievals, that piece of it has been a big part of what our CISO group, they don't report into me, but what they do. And it's all about looking at broad sets of data. A lot of it, like we were talking about, it's unstructured data. Some of it's typical audit trails that's stored in relational databases. Some of it is old mainframe file systems, because if you're an insurance company, you have mainframes. They're not going anywhere. So it's disparate data, and being able to access it and look for patterns. And that's really important from protecting your enterprise. And it's both internal and external actors. The more fun thing, though, is, we use it for fraud prevention. That's the big thing for insurance. Again, it's how we price. So when we price insurance products, we have to price for fraud. So the more fraud that we can prevent, the more competitive our prices can be, the more money. Tsvi, you got to put that on.
I do.
the more money the firm can make. So we've been able to use that pattern recognition off these very large data sets of claims and across, and we're basically a Japanese company too, which a lot of people don't know, but we make 80-85% of our revenue in Japan. So it's across kanji, it's across English, but how do you look at all that stuff? And we've just busted a $2 million fraud ring out of Hawaii, not too long ago. And again, it's not a big number, but the more of that stuff you prevent, that you get in front of, it just helps you price your products lower and bring more money to the bottom line. And it wasn't something we could have done 4 or 5 years ago, right? It's being able now using data scientists, and we have some using our actuaries, which are glorified data crunchers. And the new technology base, it really changes the game. The last thing I'll throw out there is not something we're doing now, but it's, we're looking at InsurTech. We do a lot of that, and a company that we may invest in. It's facial recognition, but it's beyond that. Is where this industry will go is you can sit in front of your computer. We'll see your face. We can tell how old you are. There's other things that you may not want us to know that you probably can find out. There's some disease markers that you can get from that, and again, it's then we can price risk in real time. So this idea of being able to do, instead of just broad demographic pricing or risk management, which is what insurance companies do now. If you're 20 to 40, your life insurance is going to cost a certain amount. If you don't smoke, if you exercise, it's the basic questions to looking at someone's face and being able to take all that in and then give them a price right there. I mean, and then probably hitting social media and looking at, what websites are they looking at. I mean, no one's there yet, but I think in a decade, that's, we're probably there and past that. And again, it's all working off that same thing. Can you manage large sets of data and find patterns?
Thank you. Last question, Georgia. So I think all of you have kind of mentioned AI, ML. How are you guys utilizing that at J&J?
So we started first in the pharma business, and I was the CEO of pharma for the last 7 years before going to global head for all of J&J for data sciences. So we started, first of all, by bringing some real data scientists. These are medical doctors with computer science or informatics degrees. And so true interdisciplinary with deep domain knowledge. And I think that is key. Domain knowledge and also knowing what is the right question or right hypothesis and what's the right data, the relevant data. So that's the first thing. And then we started implementing it, everything from R&D, where we're actually using sensor data as well as clinical and real-world data. That's a big breakthrough in the healthcare industry, the availability of real-world data. This is data from patients outside of clinical trials. So we have 650 million patient data, completely anonymized. So we're able to bring genomics and sensor data and clinical data and real-world data, and we are actually able to create digital phenotypes. We're looking at digital biomarkers. Now can actually have digital information to be able to know when there will be an onset of a disease or you might have a heart attack. We're using it to working with our customers on proving the value of our products, because now we're signing contracts based on value rather than just on the label. It's been used in operations in looking at IoT data and trying to prevent outages. And of course, we're using it in commercial, where we're identifying the most effective channels. So the use is wide. I just want to finish with 2 words. One is be very careful about who you give access to your data to do the analytics. You have to have people who really are domain experts. And then, because otherwise, if the company doesn't use AI, they're going to miss the boat, but that everybody understands that. But on the other hand, if you turn it to the hands of people who really don't know how to analyze data and develop models that the wrong models, now we have technology, the software, the right software, that can also destroy your company. The other thing is about change management, and we're coming now finally, because we've been very successful at J&J, to really demonstrate the value and the potential of AI. But now what's interesting is now that you have insights that comes from a computer that is not the same as the insights that a scientist or a business person would have based on their experience, based on their knowledge and their intuition. And that's where I think the real change management will be required. It's not the organization, all that will happen, it's structure, it will be directive, but getting down to an individual who has relied for many years on their knowledge, on their intuition, on their gut feeling of what's the next step, or a scientist, and take the direction from the outcome of machine learning, and that will be the big change.
Wonderful. So first of all, thank you again for the opportunity. Georgia, thank you. Pete, thank you. Tsvi, thank you.